Okay, I'm hoping that your brains are pretty fresh. My testimony, somebody asked last time that I would share it when I was here this time, and, well, we were doing other stuff, but if you have the energy to listen to it, then we can do that. My testimony, as most testimonies do, starts before I was born. My mother grew up in New York in a fairly large Catholic family. She was the youngest of different brothers and sisters, was always considered kind of the black sheep of the family, because her brothers and sisters are very talented. I haven't asked my mom the details, but when she was the age of 12, she had an experience with God, and I didn't find this out till a few months ago, but she told me that she learned to pray all of the time. Like, as she goes around, she'll be thinking and praying with God. And she learned this when she was 12. That's a gift. So, naturally, you could expect my mom had inclinations towards religion. And so when she graduated high school, because she was Catholic and she wanted to be a good, faithful, pious Catholic, my mom decided to enter a nunnery. And so she was going through the initiation period of becoming a nun. While there, she started to read the Bible on her own, which A, is not something that she had ever done, and B, not something that Catholics usually do. But my mom is kind of independent that way. And apparently the nunnery, I don't know if all nunneries are like this, so don't take it that way, but the nunnery where she was at, the nuns were not very kind. And so as she was reading the Bible, and she's comparing what the nuns are doing to what she's reading in the Bible, and she's thinking, these two don't match up at all. And so before she officially became a nun, she bailed out. She left the nunnery. And through a series of events, she went traveling through the country, and then she met my dad. Now, my dad was your stereotypical jock. Big into sports. He was a beach bum. He lived in California along the beach. Muscular, handsome, girls just followed him everywhere, plays guitar, and very intelligent. He wasn't just a musclehead. He's a smart guy, or he was a smart guy. And so I guess my mom was something pretty special because, like I said, he just attracted women like no tomorrow, but saw something in my mom that I guess he decided was valuable. So they dated and eventually got married. Unfortunately, my dad was not faithful to my mom many, many times. And so, for example, I guess one time my mom found my dad with someone else, and so she gets the keys to his car, drives it, and slams it into a telephone pole. So, this is my mom. But before that happened, when my dad was younger and he was out in Arizona, because he moved, he attended a Revelation seminar. And this wasn't like the format that we have today. The format that he took it as was a giant Bible study. You come into a room and there's these circular tables and you sit down with study guides and you study. It's basically like having a Bible worker, but just en masse. And he was convinced that the Bible was true, and that there was a God, that the prophecies were true. And now because of his... beforehand. And now he had a lot of problems. He smoked and he drank and things like that. So I don't think he got baptized as an Adventist, but he thoroughly believed Adventist beliefs. So when he and my mom got together, he would witness to people at work and things like that. He tried to witness to my mom, and my mom is spiritually inclined. You'd think this would be a good thing. But my mom did not dress very appropriately. And so apparently she went into an Adventist church one day. I think she had a pretty short skirt on. And they basically told her to get out and never come back because of what she was wearing. And so she was obviously really upset and hurt, and she promised never to go back. Now, thankfully, that's changed. She started attending an Adventist church over the past 4 or 5 years. So praise the Lord for that, but don't do that. So anyway, this kind of tumultuous family relationship was what I was born into. And I was an accident. I was not supposed to exist. In fact, they were not planning. They had my sister, and they were going to wait like 4 or 5 years until their next child. I came a year and a half after my sister was born. Now, it's good they had me when they did, because within the next 2 years, they had divorced. So I would not have existed had that not happened. Now, to my childhood, because they divorced, I ended up bouncing around from house to house a lot, because there'd be different custody battles. I think the first one happened when I was like 2 or 3 years old, where they'd fight in court and I'd go live with my mom, and then they'd fight in court a few years later, I'd go live with my dad. And I had several of these transitions as a child. Eventually, I ended up landing at my mom's house for my high school years. That's until my mom left for Canada, and then I went back with my dad, but I was in college by that point. That was my choice. It's hard for me to get attached to people because I'm used to just up and leaving. It's kind of like, I'll see you in a few years, and then I get back together, and it's like, oh, it's like we've never left. That's how I treat it. So it's easy to move, but it's hard to get attached. But one of the major events that happened while I was living with my dad is that I got introduced to video games. Now, one of my earliest memories is Christmas time when I was 3 years old. And I remember seeing like this kind of rectangular looking present, and I opened it up, and it was a new video game that my dad had bought for me.
3 years old?
Yes, I started playing games when I was 3. And of course, I liked them, Now, I played outside, and I had friends, and I'd go biking and things like that. But my dad enjoyed them, and so I started playing them. And now, there's a verse which I think has a lot to say here. It's in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 9. I'll just read it to you. Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 9. Here's what it says. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. In other words, better are things that you can actually see and touch than fantasy.
Where is it? Ecclesiastes?
Chapter 6, verse 9. Better is reality than fantasy. And then he explains why. This is also vanity, emptiness, nothingness, it's worthless, and vexation of spirit. How many of you know the word vexation? Can you give me a synonym for vexation?
Frustration.
Yeah, that's the one. Frustration. The reason why real stuff is better than fake stuff is that fake stuff is frustrating. That if you like things that do not actually exist, you are frustrated because you can never have them. They don't exist. That summarizes the difficulties with artificial realities like fantasy, or in my case, video games, very well. And I'll explain why. The thing is that over time, I began to play more and more of the games because I liked them, and less of real life, which meant friends, school, whatever. To give you an idea about how bad it eventually got, there was a game that I liked to play, and I was around like 14, 15 years old at this time, and it was summer break, so no school, no responsibilities. And the computer that I would play on was in my dad's bedroom. Now, obviously, I cannot play while my dad is sleeping, because he sleeps in the bedroom. Now, if you know anything about children on summer break, they do not wake up early. It's like, 8 or 10 o'clock. Some of my friends would wake up at noon. That's how bad they were. I'd wake up at like 10 or 11, which is still bad. But because the computer was in his room, I wanted to play. So without an alarm clock, I would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, right when my dad was leaving for work. And so I'd listen to him leave his bedroom and leave the house and drive off. And then I would get up and I would get onto the computer and I would sit there until 9:30 at night, with occasional breaks for food and bathroom. And even that was just very occasional. So literally, for like 15 hours a day, for a month, I did this. That's how bad it got. The challenge with games is that they literally become all-consuming, because real life is hard, but games are easy. You know, real life, if you want to plant something and grow something, it takes weeks or months to actually get something done. You have to till the ground, you have to plant it, take care of it, make sure nothing eats it, and then you actually have to harvest it and hope that it doesn't get frozen in the meantime. You know, I played farming games where you press a button, ooh, hey, a strawberry appears. You know, that's attractive. And the video game world, I had a lot of power. Now, I know it wasn't real, but it felt real. And so as a child, that really attracted me.
Were you competing?
Eventually, yes. And so that started to take its toll. Later on, when I would play games against other people, because I didn't start off playing against other people, but it moved that direction. I remember there was one time I was playing a game and I was trying to defend this spot. And it was in like a valley, and this person comes down the hill and he fights me. Now the thing was, by this point I was quite good. So I knock him out, no problem. And then I sit back down. And somebody else comes down the hill and I knock him out. This happens like 9 times. Somebody comes down, I win the fight, and I sit back down. And then I'm sitting there, and down the hill, I see all 9 of them coming down the hill. I did not win. But actually, I became quite mean. I told a story last night to Skip, where I was sitting somewhere in a game, like I said, and somebody just sees me there and starts attacking me. Just because. That's just how things go in the game world. You sit there, you're exposed. And so again, I'm pretty good. So I fought him and I won, and I sit back down. And then for some reason, the same person comes up to me again and starts fighting me again. And so again, we fight and I sit back down because I win. And then for a 3rd time, he comes, I don't know why he came there again, and he sees me and he turns around and runs. Now, that would have been enough, but at this point, I was really angry because, he had bothered me so much, so I chased him down. That's the kind of person I was. I was not kind. And that began to come out in my regular life as well. I'll get there. So anyway, but my life was starting to go downhill because of these games. As I got more into them, my schoolwork went downhill. Now, I am academically gifted. I never struggled in school. When I actually decided to try in college, I got nearly straight A's. I worked hard for them, but I got them. And school, it would have been no trouble had I tried. But I was getting C's and D's and F's. Big problem. It's because I never did my homework. I never cared. But not only that, I had a lot of social problems too, because I never spent time with friends. I was just a very awkward person socially. And so I only had like 3 friends through my high school years in a school of like over 1,000. I didn't really connect with people either because the games were just more fun. So I never went out and did anything. I'm not the strongest guy. You can probably guess why that's the case. And I really didn't have any ambition whatsoever. I didn't care about getting a career or succeeding in life because in my head, I was succeeding. I had everything I wanted. I was successful. I enjoyed the games. It made me feel satisfied. And so, don't care. Now, as you can imagine, this started to have consequences. Like I said, I did not do well in high school. I could have done a lot better. But it was when I got to college that things got really bad. Now, in high school, the teachers still kind of hold your hand. You can, if you're smart enough, you can get by, by the skin of your teeth, just do really well on the exams. I'd get like 90, 100% on the exams, and I just bomb all the homework because I just never would do it. In college, that does not fly. In college, it's you better put in effort or you're not going to make it. And so it was like I hit a brick wall. Now, I like math, and I'm a math teacher. I took calculus 3 times. I could have passed the first time, no problem, but I never put effort into it. I was too busy playing games. It took me 5 years to get a 2-year degree. No joke. And again, the reason why was I was not putting effort into it because I was playing games with my friends. Now, this led to other things. Like I said, my character was becoming more warped and more violent. I never was the type of person to shoot people, thankfully, not in real life anyway. But I really did gain a disregard for property and people in general. And so my friends and I would go out and we would vandalize nearby towns and neighborhoods. And I'm not going to tell you the things that we would do. But long story short, we got arrested, which is good. Now, as you can imagine, well, okay, I say it's good, but at the time it did not feel good at all. So, I think the worst part about being arrested is that you have to call your parents. Yes?
Were you playing out your games? Or did you learn that behavior in your games?
I don't think so. My friends were the ones that were already doing the vandalizing. And it's like, oh, cool, and I just wanted to do what they were doing. But it did create a weakness in me that I actually enjoyed doing that type of thing because I would destroy stuff in games. You just carry that over to real life. I don't think I would have done it without my friends prompting, but it certainly opened the door. Good question. So anyway, I had to call my parents, or at least my dad, because that's who I was living with at the time. And, it's like, hi, Dad, I'm in jail. It's not a fun thing to say. And I give my dad a lot of credit here, because honestly, my dad was the kind of person to get angry and, spank me and things like that. And so he'd get angry very quickly. But it was weird, because when he came to pick me up, he did not show any anger whatsoever. I think he was just flat out confused. And so we're driving home, and I remember he was just talking. I think he was just trying to find the words to say. And he finally said, Jensen, I want to help you, but I can't. Now, at the time, I thought he was talking about the soon coming legal trouble, because of course I'm going to go to court. But I wish I could ask him, but I wonder if he actually meant something different. I'm wondering if he meant that he had seen where my life was going, and he had no idea how to stop the free fall that I was in. Because he was the one that was paying for the 5 years of college, and thankfully it was community college, so it wasn't terribly expensive, but he was really trying to prop me up, but I was warped, and he didn't know what to do about it. And to be honest, I didn't know what to do about it, because I knew I was messed up. It's like, but how do you get out of there? It's like you're in a prison. You don't even know how to get out or even have the desire. You just know that things are bad. So it's very strange. Now, so I'm going to rewind a bit back to when I was about 6 years old. Something else that my dad did, like I said, he was very evangelistic. And so one day when I was 6 years old, I was watching Saturday morning cartoons, and my dad comes into the door, and he's like, hey, Jensen, get ready, we're going to church. I'm like, what's church? I'm 6, I don't know this. So he drove us 30 minutes to the Adventist church in the area. And so this started a regular weekly habit of going to church. Now, I really do give my dad a lot of credit here, because even when I was living with my mom, he would come almost every weekend and take us to church. So, I mean, at times we'd live like 45, 50 minutes away, so he'd drive the 50 minutes to pick us up, 30 minutes to get to church, and then he'd drive us back, and then he'd drive the 50 minutes back home. So it's like a 3-hour drive, just to take his kids to church. So he really believed in it. And he did this from the age of 6 until about the age of 23. Even in college, he made sure that I was going to church basically every week. Yeah, he was consistent. And I never questioned him on it, It was just the thing that we did. And so I learned how to sing out of a hymnal, like, read the notes and things like that. It was kind of a fun puzzle as a kid to figure out why people hit certain pitches, But then around the age of 12, my dad gave my sister and I the same Bible studies that he had done at that seminar. It was the exact same studies. And so we went through those, the 28 fundamental beliefs, basically. And now my dad was a good teacher. And I remember doing the 1260 days. He had a whiteboard like what we had here. And he drew out the whole chart and noted that, okay, in 538 this event happened. And in 1798 the Pope was taken prisoner. And so the 1260 days was perfectly fulfilled. And I remember sitting at the dining room table seeing this. And at 12 years old, I was convinced the Bible is real. Yeah. I mean, it was like, it's obvious. What can predict the future, And so even though I had bad friends that did sometimes try to weaken my faith, some of them were atheists and would challenge me on things, that seed that he planted lodged in my head. And it shielded me from other people's unbelief, because they'd be like, well, God doesn't exist. It's like, you haven't seen the 1260 days. So now, it didn't actually affect my life, mind you. I didn't change at all. I would still play games. I'd do nasty stuff. Again, I was only 12, and I still had another 11 years to go. But it had an effect. Yeah, and it was a big seed. So he did want me to get baptized. And, at the time, it's like, I actually did not want to get baptized, but he's my father. And so I remember going into the baptismal tank. The pastor goes through the vows with us, and he dips me in the tank. And when he tries to bring me back up, the long baptismal robes, I had planted my heel on the robe. Now that makes it very difficult to stand, because it's all slippery. So the pastor basically hauled me out of the water and set me on my feet. And when that happened, the thought came to my mind, it's like, you know what? I must be doing this for the wrong reason. Because I don't know if that was the case, but it's almost like God let that happen to send a message to me. Jensen, you're not actually serious about this. And it was correct. It didn't change my life at all. And I had a pretty warped conception of God. So during these college years, again, my 5 years of a 2-year degree and the problems that I'm having and getting arrested, I'm still going to church. And, I heard, and I would hear messages. We had a lot of good speakers come in. It wasn't just the pastor. We'd have people from around. And sometimes I would hear something and it would really strike home like, wow, I really should give my life to God, but I wouldn't do it for one reason or another. So after being arrested, I did start to change. I realized that, my friends are kind of dangerous. I would still go hang out with them, but that was the end of any kind of illegal activity with them, thankfully. But I think it really got things going in my head, like, Jensen, really, what are you doing with your life? And then the really bad thing happened. And that was the video games stopped being fun. You see, I think a lot of the trick with games is that they present the same thing with a different coating of paint on it each time. But it's really the same game at its core. Games where you shoot people, It's the same. Whether the graphics are bad or whether they're shiny and, nice looking, it's the same thing. And over time, I had played so many games that it was like I was playing the same thing over and over. And so what this began was a phase where I was very unhappy, because now the only thing that brought me joy no longer brought me joy. So I didn't enjoy anything. And so I would buy a game one day, I'd play it for like an hour or two and say, you know what, this is boring. So I wouldn't even finish it, I'd put it somewhere. A few days later, I would buy another game and I'd play it for an hour or two. It's like, this doesn't give me any satisfaction either. And so this would happen, and I just keep buying games but never actually playing them. And in fact, there was one game I bought and I didn't even touch the thing. I just put it away. So I was in a lot of distress, as you can imagine. Now, about this time, I didn't learn this until later, apparently the church that I went to had decided to pray for me. I guess the elders got together and decided to pray for different people in the congregation, and apparently I was one of their targets. So, in a nice way. And they had been praying for me for, I think, a couple months. Now, do any of you know the name Chad Cruiser? Oh, yeah. That guy's awesome. Yeah. So this was before he was ever an evangelist. He was part of a ministry called Chicago Outpost Ministries. I grew up in Chicago. And so he was working under another man, and they were big on media, which is probably why Chad Cruiser likes to make videos now. He was very big into that. And so one day, apparently they invited Chad Cruiser to come and speak at our church, not for evangelistic series, but what he decided to do was to give his testimony. And I can't explain what happened, but when I listened to him, I felt like I was listening to my own life. The only difference was that you replaced my video games with his drugs, because that was his thing. He was stuck in a drug addiction. But it was all the same stuff. He got into it when he was younger, and he didn't care about school, and so his grades went downhill. He got in with the wrong crowd of people and started doing things that weren't good. His life was very unsatisfactory, and he just didn't know what to do. I forget how it happened in his case, but somehow God reached out to him, and he decided to dedicate his life to God. And so then he told a story, which is actually quite funny. Apparently he went to a school of evangelism, and he slept with a knife and his car keys under a pillow because he was worried that sometime in the middle of the night they'd come in and try to kidnap him or something, or force him to say, it's like, I'm going to fight my way out, if I have to. Now that, of course, never happened. But anyway, he had a pretty good experience at the school. And then he got sent on different evangelistic trips. He went to Greenland for a time. And what he told us is that it rains sideways because it's so windy. And the people there are super secular. So he'd go to doors and he'd just get rejected left and right. And he thought he did no good whatsoever. And then later that year, they had 35 baptisms, which was the most baptisms they had in a decade. So somehow God used him despite having a very difficult time. And so he's giving all these stories at the church. He had just gotten engaged to his now wife. And so she was sitting in the back, pointed to her yeah, there's my future wife there. And he spreads out his hands I'm just so happy for what God did for me. And I saw that, and it's wow, that's amazing. And then something really interesting happened. Is that I heard a voice in my head. Now, it wasn't my own thoughts, because it was much more powerful. I know what my thoughts sound like, and it wasn't me. And all it said were 5 words. It said, I want to use you. And then it was silent. So I walk out of the church and kind of in a daze because of what just happened. And the thing is that I don't quickly catch on to stuff. Like some people are very quick mentally that way, like they really understand the situation. I was confused. I had no idea what was going on. But it affected me. And so when I went home, I'm like, well, now what do I do? I knew something has happened, but I didn't really know what the next step was. I think at this point, God was using the Holy Spirit because what would happen is that I would have some type of objective in mind, like I need to do such and such. And I have no idea why I needed to do it. I just knew I had to. The first step that I had to take, that I didn't realize I had to take, was that I had to read the Bible cover to cover. Now that's a weird objective for somebody just starting off, but I did. I managed to get through the whole thing in about a month. I didn't know about year Bible reading plans at that point. Maybe I would have tried that instead. And so I just plowed through it. I would, by the way, never read the Bible face down while laying down on a bed. I remember reading some parts and I would just face plant into it and go to sleep for like an hour. I'd wake up, it's like, oh, I must have fallen asleep. Well, I'm awake now, and so I could, keep reading a bit longer. So I just muscled through it. I understood so little. Isaiah was complete confusion to me. The prophets, the first 9 chapters of Chronicles, I got there and it's like, no way, I'm not dealing with this. And I just went to the New Testament. It's a genealogy, in case you don't know. But there were some things that I got out of that first reading that affected me. One of the biggest ones was the book of Jeremiah. Now, okay, there's a lot of Jeremiah I did not understand. Like the first 10 or 11 chapters, it's a whole bunch of prophecies about Israel in their day. And the end of Jeremiah, there's more prophecies. But in the middle, there's some really good stories. And when I read the stories, I was amazed at the type of person Jeremiah was. There's one story in there where he's telling people that this land is going to be carried captive into Babylon. And so the rulers get really upset with him, and they throw Jeremiah into a muddy pit for a dungeon. And we don't know how long he was stuck down there, but he was stuck there for a while, and muddy pits are not fun places to be. So after a while, they let down some ropes, and they pull him out of the pit, and he's brought to King Zedekiah, or I think it's Zedekiah. And Zedekiah's like, okay, now what do you have to say? He'd been in a muddy pit. His message might have changed. And Jeremiah just tells him, you are going to be carried away into the land of Babylon. It's like, this guy's made of steel. I mean, same message, didn't matter what they did to him, he just did it. And it really impressed me that somebody could give their life to God and do that. It's like, man, I want to be like Jeremiah. I want to be that strong, Because I felt so useless and weak, and this guy's like indomitable. So after reading the Bible and after seeing Jeremiah, I had a desire to give my life to God. But there was that doubt still in my mind that maybe the Bible wasn't true. And so this is where that seed that my dad planted kicked in. I knew that there were prophecies in the Bible, and so I decided on my own, not with my dad's help, to study them and see if they were real, if they had actually happened in history. Now, I wasn't a very good student, mind you. It took me about a week to get through them, the ones that I knew. But at the end of that week, I was looking at a webpage of the Kingdom of Greece and how Greece had been broken into 4 parts. And you could see on the map how it was chopped up. And I'm looking at Daniel chapter 7 with the 4-headed leopard, how it broke into 4 pieces. And I think, this is real. This is not a joke. No one else could predict the future. The Bible has to be from God. So I just kind of sat there like, well, now what do I do? Because, now I know that my life has to change. And so that is when I actually gave my life to God. I knelt my head down and I told God, it's like, God, if you want to use me, please use me. But you're going to have to tell me because I have no idea what I should be doing. Didn't hear anything that time. So after that, now at this point, I had kind of figured out something I actually wanted to do in college, and that was to be a computer programmer. So do computer science. And because I actually really enjoy programming. I don't do it now, but I would have had I not become a Christian. But after I read about Jeremiah, and after I had decided to work for God, I knew I had to give it up. And that was really difficult. I mean, okay, yeah, I was a bad student. It's still hard to give up all of that time that you spend going for something and just to say, see you later, and throw it to the side. And I really struggled with that decision to do that. But eventually, after weighing it, it's like, you know what? If I stay in computers, the games are going to eat me alive, because I was still playing them. And so it's like, you know what? I really need to get out of this for my own good. Maybe that's why God wants me to escape. So I did. I just said, forget it. But then I kind of need a replacement, you know? So I'm asking God, well, what should I do? And I prayed that prayer twice, that God would tell me, hey, what should I be doing? And so after the second time, on the kitchen counter, I saw a letter from Amazing Facts. And this letter was talking about their AFCO program, the Amazing Facts Center of Evangelism. And it talked about, getting more grounded in the Bible, learning to share your faith with others. And it's like, hey, this is exactly what I want. I should go. Yeah, I don't know why my dad decided to leave the letter on the counter. Maybe he knew something I didn't. Don't know. So I resolved to go to AFCO. Now, also during this time, I was reading through Isaiah again. I think I was reading through again. Anyway, like I said, I understood very, very little of it until I hit chapter 58. Now, in chapter 58, you have the last two verses, and I'll just read them, and you'll understand why they had significance to me. Verses 13 and 14. It says, "If thou turn thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day." I was playing video games on the Sabbath. In fact, that was my ritual. My dad would take me to church, come home, I'd have some kind of lunch, he would go take a nap, and I'd play games the rest of the day. I had no idea that it was a problem. My dad never corrected me on it. Maybe he didn't realize, or he just didn't want to disturb me. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I was playing games on the Sabbath. And when I read this, it's almost like I think God really wanted me to know it, because it really looked like the letters just jumped off the page. Like, this is for you. And it's like, oh man, I'm playing games on the Sabbath, and I should not be doing that. And so, another hard decision, but I resolved during those 24 hours, I was not going to play anything. Let me tell you, that first Sabbath was miserable. It was rotten. I never had such a bad Sabbath, because all I could think about was like, I just want to play. And I can't, I don't know what else to do with myself. I live in a suburb, so what I ended up doing was going for like 3-hour walks around the different neighborhoods and exploring every nook and cranny of the neighborhood where I was, just to do something else. And so the second Sabbath was about the same. It was pretty bad. The third Sabbath, I actually started to enjoy it. You see, I knew I had a problem with the games, and I couldn't quit. I didn't think I was strong enough to quit. I wasn't. But during those 24 hours, I couldn't play. It was the first taste of freedom from games that I'd ever had, because God said, you do not during this time. And that was the opening wedge that finally led to my video game addiction being broken, because I realized if I don't have to play for one entire day, well, maybe I can stop on the other days too. So the Sabbath was a big, big help to me in cracking my addiction. Yeah. Now, it still took 2 years to get over it. For example, the one game that I had bought and I just kind of thrown into the corner and never played. So what had happened is I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop. And I collected all of the games that I could find. I put them into a trash bag and I put them out to the curb to be carted away by the trash men. It's like, good, I'm done. It's over. And then a few days later, I'm poking through my closet and I find that game that I had never actually played. I looked at it and it's like, oh, I should really throw this out. And so I go to work. I worked for Sears at that point in one of their offices. And they have a trash can outside of the office. And so I throw the game in there and I go inside. 15 minutes later, I'm upside down in the trash can, digging the game out. I was an addict. And so for another 2 weeks, I installed my computer and I played it for like 2 weeks, every spare moment that I had. And then, of course, I feel disgusting, because, anyway. So I had serious problems. And then once I got rid of that, well, there's a lot of free games online. I don't mean the stolen ones. There's ones that are legally free, and so I'd start playing those. And eventually, I just had to say, I have to stop. This has to end somewhere. And that's about the time I came to Ouachita Hills, is when I was finally too busy. And so I stopped. So I'm going to stop there because, more stuff happened. Lots more stuff happened. But that's really the gist of it. I had a really bad addiction, and it almost broke me as a person. And God, when I was so useless, says, hey, I want to use you. And in my weakness, he has done so. Yes?
Did you meet your wife at Ouachita Hills?
I did. That was a good thing. That's a whole other story.
That's college.
Yeah. Yeah, my second bout of college, which went a lot better than my first. Yes?
What would be your advice for young grandchildren? Games.
Okay. How to explain this? I can tell you things that I have found helpful myself. I can't tell you how to apply it. What I said before about better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire, better is reality than fantasy. One of the most effective means of getting people away from video games is to expose them to the difficulties of real life. It's not a coincidence that in my college years it became a frustrating experience because my addiction was crippling me in real life. And it created a lot of difficulties. Now, that's not a guarantee. I know people that have those same problems. In fact, I have a friend named Adam, and he is absolutely addicted to this game. He plays like 16 hours a day. But not only that, it's his source of income because he develops parts of the game that other people use. And in fact, he's had like tens of millions of people use his stuff. But the thing is that he is so badly taking care of himself that his teeth have fallen out of his mouth. And he has all kinds of health issues because he cares more about the game than his actual life. So that's not a guarantee, but they really need to feel the pain of actual living, which is hard as a child because your parents take care of you.
Parents also play the games.
Then they're in serious, serious trouble. It was helpful to me to be exposed to real life even though I was playing. For example, I did develop a love of hard work as a child. My stepmom would take me out to go weed whacking around her yard, for example. And I liked it. It was fun. Like, we get to hit all these different weeds. I wasn't very good at it, but I enjoyed it. And I would help, and my mom trained me to be helpful, so I'd try and help her around the house with different chores and stuff. Then I'd go back to playing, but I at least would, ask to help. So I guess, and I enjoyed going for walks in nature, for example. There's a beautiful national park in Wisconsin near where I lived called Devil's Lake. It was just a really long lake. Gorgeous, gorgeous place. Loved going there, loved camping, that kind of thing. So the exposure to real life did help, even if it was hard. But the grandkids will probably have to suffer. Yeah, it's nasty stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I need to get you in contact with a lady who's really worried about her grandson.
Okay.
To the games, so.
Okay. Feel free. I'll tell her whatever I can.
Do we have?
Is this thing? Yeah, we can show the video.
It's true.
Okay, well,
Yeah. But yeah, the biggest thing really is coming into contact with real life. If they're allowed to live in the fantasy world without problems, if you support them financially so that they don't have to work, it's never going to end. In fact, I think one of the kindest things you can do to an older video game addict is kick them out of the house. In fact, that did happen to me at one point when I was fighting with my dad. I ended up moving into my friend's house, and I realized that, you know what? Couch surfing is a terrible way to live. I lived on a couch. I couldn't do anything that I wanted because I had to stay up as late as everyone else stayed up. And I realized, you know what? This is a bad idea. So yeah, but there has to be some pain. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can close. Let you all go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Glad it can be useful. Let's have a word of prayer. We can close out. Our Father, as this was Communion Sabbath, I'm grateful that you pulled me out of, I really don't know how I ever would have gotten out on my own. So thank you for pulling me out. You really did work mightily on my behalf. I ask that for those that have family that are worried about the same issue, help those poor souls that they may escape. Let them suffer if need be. You don't let people fall down and just die, but sometimes we need to hurt. I ask that you impress them with your truth, that it is true, that they can find a way of escape. And guide us safely home, because who knows? In Jesus' name, amen.